This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. We know that the American economy is struggling, but I wanted to talk about the other economy that is in very difficult times, and that is, of course, our trading partners in Europe. The European economy has been very uneven in performance and lately has been dragged down by enormous debts that have been incurred, especially by countries such as Spain and Greece, and also Italy and Ireland. Most of us didn't realize until some numbers came out this last week that Italy is really in the worst shape of all. Italy's sovereign debt is enormous. And people generally forget that the American economy and the European economy are very closely intertwined. Our banking systems are interconnected. We buy and sell a lot to Europe and sell a lot to Europe and buy a lot from Europe, and so as a trading partner they're important. And when Europe has an economy that is in, let's just call it almost a tailspin, it's certain to affect the United States and make it more difficult for the President Obama and Congress to address the American problem. We know that Italy has to fix its debt and has not been doing it. The government of Italy is in disarray. Frankly, we now suddenly have come to the conclusion by looking at what's going on that Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi of Italy has built a political machine there that runs on patronage. It runs on favors, on favoritism, on the fact that he is a very wealthy man, and his companies, his media companies, for example, employ a lot of the people in the news media in Italy. So Berlusconi is very powerful in spite of the fact that his administration is a disgrace, a shambles. This week some tapes emerged of him talking about all the women that were invited to his house and lined up to have fun with him. And he said he could only have fun with 8 of the 11 women that were at this particular party. He prides himself in his sexual prowess. He has had problems with underage girls, and the stories are that his friends kind of procure girls, in many cases actually prostitutes, for him to have his bunga parties. And so Italy, with an enormous debt problem, also has a government that isn't functioning. I mean, Berlusconi hardly has time to run the government because he is such a dysfunctional leader. And under normal circumstances, he would lose control of the vote in Parliament and lose the majority and be kicked out of office and replaced by someone. But we now have reached the conclusion that that's not likely to happen, no matter what he does. He can't really do anything much worse. So Italy's austerity program, trying to essentially cut back on their spending and tighten up their budgets, reduce their budget deficit, is not functioning, which means that the bond rating services this week downgraded the Italian bonds, so that people wanting to buy bonds, investors buy government bonds and they buy company bonds as an investment. Those bonds now are no longer as valuable because they've been degraded. And the problems in Spain are mind-boggling. 45 to 50% of all young people in Spain are unemployed and can't find a job. And Spain has suffered from the same housing disasters that the United States finds itself in. The housing market has collapsed. People are being foreclosed on. There's no construction going on. Lots of properties empty, and nobody has the money to buy properties. And of course, Greece remains such a terrible problem because Greece so overspent and mismanaged its economy that now the talk has been that maybe Greece should just default on their loan, and that might be the best solution, to just essentially let them go bankrupt, which would mean that all of the Greek debt would sort of be wiped out. Of course, it would also be a disaster for Greece in terms of its future credit ratings and ability to borrow. So that the picture from Europe economically is a picture in which Germany remains the healthiest of the economies, and Germany is trying essentially to rescue the rest of Europe with its banks. Unfortunately, now there is the euro, which is the common currency of Europe. That poses a problem because it means the other countries don't have their own currency anymore, and they can't adjust to these economic problems by devaluing their currency, making it cheaper to do business with them, making their products cheaper. And so the worst of all possible worlds has descended on Europe, which is a monetary policy based on a common currency, the euro, but fiscal policy, taxes and spending, that is still controlled by the governments of Europe. It's an impossible combination. It was never meant to be. If you're going to have a common currency, you also have a common fiscal policy in terms of taxes and spending. And the Europeans seem to be having a very difficult time figuring out how to get their arms around this crisis and prevent it from rolling even further and creating even further repercussions for the global economy. So we have the Europeans in a very difficult situation. The World Bank, by the way, this week, the International Monetary Fund this week issued a report in which they said that the world economy is in very bad condition, that economic growth is going to be extremely slow, half of what was projected, and that includes economic growth in the United States, which is now projected to be 1.5% or so, which is extremely disappointing, and further points to the fact that there is a real problem with the entire world economy. It's not just the United States, and it's actually not just Europe either. So that's the news about Europe and the global economy. We hope to be able to bring you some good news sometime in the near future. This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.